Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Anna Garrett, hormone whisperer, menopause expert, and doctor of pharmacy. I sound like I'm out of breath, but I shouldn't be because I haven't been running up and down the stairs or anything. But anyway, I'm here to do my menopause minute, and today we are going to talk about estrogen. Specifically, we are going to talk about estrogen dominance and whether that's a real thing. We are going to talk about low estrogen and the symptoms of that and how they vary relative to high estrogen. And then we're going to talk about whether you can have both, because it sounds intuitively like that might not make sense. So let's talk first about what hormones would do in a perfect world during perimenopause, if it were a perfect world. So what naturally should happen is that your hormones should gradually decline together. So your progesterone, your estrogen, and your testosterone in our perfect world would go in lockstep together, and you would have no symptoms of imbalance, and you would just basically stop having periods, and that would be it. Unfortunately, that is not the case for most women. And that's because women in industrialized countries like the United States or Western Europe are exposed to a lot more compounds that can disrupt their hormones than women who are in undeveloped countries. So for instance, women who are in Southeast Asia don't have the same kinds of problems that we have with perimenopause and menopause. So let's talk about estrogen dominance for a second. So this phrase is catchy, and it would sort of imply that you had a high estrogen level, and that's not always the case. What it really means is that your estrogen to progesterone balance is off, and it results in symptoms like heavy periods, weight gain, fatigue, insomnia, breast tenderness. So there's a whole laundry list of symptoms that go along with estrogen dominance. And yes, you may have a high estrogen level because perimenopause is characterized by a drop in progesterone, which can be very quick, and a rise in estrogen. So if you have an imbalance to start with, it just gets magnified, and so you end up with these symptoms. But estrogen dominance implies that there's one thing going on, and it also implies that there's one solution, which is fixing your estrogen. But what I've found working with my clients really is that it's more about their body's ability to maintain hormone balance. So there's a lot more that goes into that than just managing an estrogen level. There's stress, there's the environment, there's diet. So it's a whole laundry list of things that have to be considered before one jumps to the conclusion that, oh, I just need to get my progesterone level up and things will be fine. Because yes, progesterone can be super helpful, but it can cause problems for some women. And I think that I'm seeing that more and more, but I'm also seeing successes. So I don't want you to think that I'm not a progesterone fan, because if you've read my work for more than 5 minutes, you know that I like progesterone when it's used in the right setting. So let's talk about low estrogen symptoms. So the picture of low estrogen looks really different than what I just described for estrogen dominance or higher estrogen levels. So I call this picture kind of the dry and dusties, because you get night sweats, you get hot flashes, you get vaginal dryness, you get bone loss. So you get sagging skin. So it's all kind of it feels withering to me. And that's just part of our natural progression through this transition. So it's not a bad thing. It's just that it's different and it needs to be managed differently than estrogen dominance. So the question that came up in the Hormone Harmony Club was, can you have symptoms of estrogen dominance and have low estrogen? And the answer is yes. So you may wonder, well, how does that happen? Well, that happens if your estrogen levels are low, but your progesterone levels relative to those estrogen levels are even lower. So I've seen clients who had estrogen levels that were below the level of detectability, and their progesterone level was like 2, and their ratio was very, very low. And the ratio that we're looking for when we do testing is between 100 and 500, all things being equal. So those women may benefit from adding progesterone, but the problem is it doesn't work as well when your estrogen level isn't within what we consider an optimal range. So what are we going to do about all this? Well, there's several things. The first for estrogen dominance is to make sure that you're managing your exposures in your environment. So that means looking at your cosmetics and seeing if you have parabens in them, because those have been known to disrupt endocrine production, as will some sunscreens like avobenzone and oxybenzone. Second thing is to avoid as much processed food as you can and eat close to the ground, as I call it. So as close to the source of the food as you can get is best, because that minimizes your body's exposure to compounds that can interrupt your hormone production, because we want optimal hormone production. Third thing, if you have estrogen dominance, watch your diet and make sure that your body is taking in enough fiber, because fiber helps move estrogen out. And that brings me to the fourth thing. Watch your gut health. So when I say gut health, I'm talking about beginning to end. Because if your stomach doesn't have enough acid, which is a huge problem for a lot of people, thanks, Chris, I appreciate that. If your stomach doesn't have enough acid, your body's not going to be able to absorb the nutrients you need to process your food and make sure that your estrogen's being metabolized. If you move farther down your GI tract, you want your liver to be working at an optimal capacity, because that is where your estrogen is broken down. So if your estrogen isn't being broken down effectively, then it just gets recirculated in your body. And then the third thing to think about with your GI tract is, are your bowels moving regularly? Because if you're constipated, guess what? All that estrogen is backing up and it is recirculating and it is not getting pooped out, because that is how estrogen leaves your body, and there is nothing glamorous about it, but that's the way it happens. Same thing for testosterone. So those are some lifestyle tips you can think about to help with estrogen dominance. For low estrogen, the approach is a little bit different. So if you're not having symptoms of low estrogen, it's not a big deal to not be on anything. That's great, and you probably wouldn't be watching this video if that was the case. But the main things that people complain about are hot flashes, night sweats, and vaginal dryness. Because bone loss you can't see, right? Because you're never going to know that until you have a bone density test and see that you have osteopenia. And osteopenia is not really a reason to start hormone replacement therapy. However, if you are having the three things that I just mentioned and it's affecting your quality of life, then it may be worth considering hormone replacement. So that could take the form of patches. You could use progesterone cream. I am not a fan of oral estrogen because it increases your risk of heart attacks, blood clots, and strokes. And studies have shown this over and over. This is why women are cautioned, if they're on birth control pills, not to smoke, because it increases your risk of blood clots. And that's because the estrogens are having to go through your liver to be metabolized. And if that doesn't happen well, then it increases your risk of blood clots. So patches and creams are my preferred ways of hormone administration. And it can take some doing to get the dose right. So this is where testing comes in really, really handy, because you need to know what those levels are before you go down the hormone replacement road. And it amazes me how many doctors don't do any sort of testing. They just say, here's a prescription for, Climera patch or whatever. Go forth and do good. And they basically wait to see how you respond. And it's my preference that things be a little bit more individualized. So hormone replacement can make a world of difference for women who are suffering from hot flashes and night sweats. Now, you can use estrase cream or Vagifem locally. Those contain some estrogen, but they're applied vaginally, and so they don't have the same kind of absorption into your body that the patches and creams do. If you've got an imbalance of estrogen to progesterone on the high side, or estrogen dominance, then you can use Vitex, also known as chasteberry, to help level that out. That is my favorite one to use, or you can supplement with some progesterone to bring that level up and balance things out a little bit more. So those are my two main go-to things for the women that I coach and help manage their hormones. So I hope this has helped clear up any confusion that there might be about estrogen dominance. And yes, I'm postmenopausal, but I still have estrogen dominant symptoms, because that is entirely possible. And so much of that is environmental. So I encourage you to take a look around you in your home, see what you're putting on your skin, because it all goes right into your body. See what you're cleaning with. Try some essential oils to help balance things out. I like clary sage oil, but there's a great site called the Environmental Working Group, and they give you a lot of information about compounds that can be toxic or are xenoestrogens, which act like fake estrogens. And there's also a list of the dirty dozen foods, which are foods that are notoriously contaminated with pesticides and are worth substituting organic versions if you can have access to those. So that's definitely a site you'll want to check out. So if you've been supporting your body for several months and you're really not getting anywhere and you'd like to talk about your situation, please go to my website and go under the Work With Me tab and look for my Let's Talk call. It's a 97-minute, no, it's not 97 minutes, it's 45 minutes, but it's $97. And it's a great way to get some input on what you're doing and get some advice on what your next steps might be. So I'll post that link with the video as soon as I get it up. So thanks for being here. My Menopause Minute will not be on Tuesday next week. It will be on Wednesday, and I haven't figured out the time yet, but I really appreciate you being here, and I will look forward to talking to you next week. Bye.